to the Fit for Privacy Podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
Data breach response is a keenly debated topic. How do you prepare? How do you answer in 72 hours? What do you need to do? What are the first steps to take? This and more in conversation with Adi Elliott, who has spent leadership positions in companies of various size. And now he's working for Canopy Software, which prides itself as world's leading and the best data breach response solution. So let's go and talk to Eddie. So welcome, Adi. Welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast.
Thank you so much.
So let's start with our trademark question. How would you define GDPR in one word?
Well, I don't think I'll be unique here, but I'll say complex.
Complex.
Yep.
That's certainly not unique, but what's your perspective? Because everybody has a unique perspective when they choose a word.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it covers a lot of ground. So by definition, it has to speak to so many scenarios from my world that I think about every day in data breach response and what are your notification timelines. And so I think about it professionally in that regard, but to the cookie consent policies that now we're all kind of confirming to every new website we go to that we either do or do not, like what is our cookie consent and tons of in between stuff. So just the sheer breadth of all the regulations is going to have a lot of complexity to it, and by definition. But I think it's pretty overall awesome that legislation is addressing largely a lot of important stuff. It's like heady stuff, and it's hard to, one way or another, I think everyone's heart was in the right place, regardless of all of our cookie consents.
Absolutely. I think cookie consent is a little bit of a gray area, but the heart was in the right place. And this is something we all need. And in every country we need, of course, not a country specific law. A global law would have even been more easier on people, but it is what it is. And if we look at privacy, it's a broad area. And
Yep.
you already mentioned that there are many complexities, many topics to take care of. So if a company were to start, and usually we say, whether you've completed a project or you're starting a project, the best way is to start with an assessment or an audit.
Yep.
What is your view, as you have had leadership positions in many companies and you look at from a broad perspective? So what are the key touch points and what are the key elements somebody should look at when thinking of a privacy audit?
So it varies wildly by size of company, because your data footprint and what you're doing and the nature of the data you handle. But in general, getting your arms around what's happening today inside your company and what your data footprint is and what data you're processing and handling, I kind of think that's like step one. And our specific point of view on that is that there was, and again, we work backwards from data breach response, but there was kind of two kind of buckets that up until now, or up until recently, people have been playing with. On one hand, it's like having things crawl your intranets and internets and internally inside of a corporation to kind of give you senses of where data is. That's one thing. And then the other side is kind of tabletop exercises and surveys and what are the disclosed elements of data. But I'll say from a data breach response standpoint, one of our insights from seeing the projects unfold in the wild was that largely the emails and file shares are like buckets of unstructured data that people largely just don't know what's in the data. And there was no vector into it. So I would say, and yet these are primarily what happens in a data breach is you're looking at either business email compromise. So someone clicked on a phishing email or a file share somewhere and a ransomware. So in a way, getting your arms around that data is fairly critical just to have the right conversation internally about how are we handling this. And even if you ask people, they might not know, like, because they don't think about the machinations of what people do. So you really kind of got to look. You got to look for yourself to have the proper conversation. But I would say it's really important to ask people. I would say it's really important to also verify yourself, and then to get your arms around what your risks are. Like what is the data? And I mean, it sounds obvious, but figuring out like, okay, what's our most risky data to least risky data? And then where does it flow throughout the enterprise? Because that risky data can actually be in more places than people realize.
I'm so glad that you say one size does not fit all. So you need to look at your landscape, your industry, your situation, and then make up your thing, make up your, say, custom privacy audit. Because
And your
sometimes
budget
people,
too.
yeah, because sometimes people come in and saying, how many days for a privacy audit? Or how do you do a privacy audit? Can I have the template? Well, we do have a template, but the whole thing is based on the size, scale, maturity, as well as the industry you are in and the region you are in. We need to adapt and make it fit for purpose. And that's 100%. The key thing. And second thing you mentioned is very rightly, take a risk-based approach. But the other two things which you mentioned, I like to drill into a little bit more. That is the data breach part and the e-discovery part. So let's maybe drill into the data breach part. So data breach, we all know we have a 72-hour timeline, which is very, very challenging. There is a confusion around many aspects around 72 hours. But how does a company go about? Because you mentioned a lot of good words, the tabletop exercise, the preparation, the process. So walk us through, in your view, if I'm a company and I do have, as any other company, a security mechanism, that is, I do have incident and breach flow. It may not be adapted, it may not be customized yet for the personal data breaches. That is the 72-hour, the notification to the authorities and regulator. So how do you go about it? There is an incident breach process the company has, and you enter, you jump in there, and you're talking to the CISO, or maybe the DPO or the CISO, or either both of them. I mean, ideally both of them, not either both of them, ideally both of them. How do you go about? What do you tell them? Where do you start? And what are the broad 2, 3, or 5 steps to take?
So let me start by a second here, going back to your initial question about GDPR. Is one thing I'll say about it that I really appreciate is, in some ways, GDPR was like aspirational from the jump. It was like a North Star. And the important thing to note on that is that this space, data breach response and privacy through the lens of data breach response, it did not exist 10 years ago. So there was not like a bunch of robust software that had been slowly but surely keeping up with this problem. And like, so it is a new space. And in large part, the 72-hour timeline for us, that was North Star. So like, I would make an argument that especially for anything of a certain size. And if you even think about just doing the quick math on not even that many gigabytes of a PST, like 100 gig PST, a 50 gig PST, it's not unusual for that level of email to balloon into 500, like email folders, like to balloon into like 500,000, a million emails. That's not crazy. But getting your arms around how much PII is in a million emails to tell a regulatory body, like the true answer at the time GDPR was passed is like, I'll tell you in like a month when I've done the entire process. And at the beginning, I'm kind of guessing, and that's okay. Like, because like, that's why, like, when people were like, how do I comply with this? The answer is software is going to fill the gap, and Canopy is kind of a representation of that, but other software fills in the gap of other parts of GDPR too. And that's an important North Star. It's important, but in the meantime, people were just rubbing sticks together, search terms, regular expressions, before the AI came along and could really work at it. But to your point of how these things, what are the few things that I would say to like an organization or a regulatory body? I mean, step one is like, usually talk to your insurance provider right out of the gate, because they do this day in and day out. Your claims manager, is weird as it sounds, it's a space where like the insurance company knows what's up. They know the right lawyers to talk to. They know the right providers to get your arms around. So you're gonna want to talk to them really fast and get the right lawyer involved really fast. So that's like kind of thing number one. And then you can make sure the right conversations and the right processes are happening from there. I mean, after that, like, I mean, the lawyers kind of guide things and they really do know the space. And hopefully the company doesn't have a ton of experience with it because it means you're having a lot of compromise events. But I will say I think there's like an Arctic Wolf study from not that long ago that says like a third of all companies have a compromise event a year, to where if you're not one this year, over the next like couple of years, you're probably gonna be like it's very, it's a when, not if, and that's okay. Let's just like, so on the privacy side, make sure the risk is as minimal as possible. But on the data breach side, make sure we're prepared. We have the right partners around the table. We know who we're talking to. So in general, talk to your insurance company quickly, get there, and then as fast as possible, get the right lawyer to have the right conversation with them too, to run interference. It's like the first things. And then for us, I mean, then it's about, data mining and figuring out, once you've identified the compromised data, to report within 72 hours. Once you have the confirmation, you really need to get that data into a system like Canopy incredibly fast to then notify within, if you want to hit the 72-hour window.
So you're talking about a scenario that the data breach has happened. Is that right?
Well, the compromise event, yeah. I mean, whether it's a data breach. So the
compromise has happened, and then that's the moment you talk to the lawyer. What's the risk and how do you mitigate it? Yeah. You talk to an expert like you, and you try to discover what has happened, what's the evidence, what is the risk, and you quantify that, and then you make a plan on how to contain the breach.
In fairness, though, so an interesting space that we sit in is that we're the software layer, but our clients are the service providers actually servicing. So we ourselves, like Canopy, does not directly talk to the law firms in these engagements. Now they ask us for our opinions on stuff of like, hey, how do I think about this in a big picture way? But it's our clients who are in there actually doing the work day in and day out. And it's our clients who use our software. So they're like closer to the metal than we are, but we also have an interesting a more broad point of view, because obviously our software is like in the UK, in the AU, in Canada, in the US. So we kind of have a very global perspective on this in a way that any one provider might not.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned or touched upon was the role of AI.
Yep.
The artificial intelligence.
Sure.
So what role does artificial intelligence play in a situation when you know that you have detected a breach, things are out of proportion, and a lot of structured or unstructured data has been compromised? And usually for the structured one, you still have a handle on what happened or what did not happen. Yep. And the unstructured data is, how do I say, it's a mess. Let's put it like that.
It's a total mess. It's the Wild West. It's very difficult. Yeah. So for structured, at least, the benefit of structured is obviously that you generally know what's in there. Like, you know why that database exists, the business reason, and the types of information. Now, the specifics of it you might not have, but generally what it is. It's known to some degree. Now, it might be that there's like 100 million names and elements of PII that you might not be able to like get that out without exporting. But for unstructured, I mean, yeah, it's a lot more the Wild West, and you just have. So here's where AI is like built, like AI is perfect for the space, and that the problems you're trying to solve in this data breach response problem are the same problems every single time. Like, you're looking for the same data every single project. In the EU and in the UK, you know exactly what kind of data you're looking for. In Australia, you know exactly what kind of data you're looking for. In the US, you know exactly what kind of data you're looking for. And this is a much more amenable problem to AI than like a self-driving car. Because self-driving car is like just a big, broad, unclear mess of several discrete small problems. But like, even figuring out what is a crosswalk or not, we're still like training that. It's way easier to teach an AI model something extremely specific. Like, even though religious affiliation can be tricky, getting it in a loose text is way easier than crosswalks over time when you have millions and even billions of examples to train the software on. And throughout the process of data breach response and privacy on the proactive side, each element of PII is amenable to like an AI model. And so for that, like the EU saying 72 hours, like that's kind of, if you're talking about like 1 million records of unstructured data, that's almost by definition only an AI problem. Like there's no way that a human could get their arms around 1 million documents like within 72 hours. They just can't. But AI can, and it's specifically designed for that. So in that sense, I would say the space more than most is amenable to it. And the whole process itself is so repeatable that you can speed it up, like you chip away and the AI gets better time and time and time again. More so than like an adjacent but separate space like ediscovery. Because one of the things that's like interesting in our world is that a lot of like I had previous experience at ediscovery companies, some other people within Canopy did too, is like our recognition that ediscovery is adjacent and similar in some ways, but it's not data breach response. It's a totally separate problem. And answering, like answering the question of is a one or more documents legally relevant to two things that a corporation are arguing about, like that's a very different endeavor than saying, is there PII in this? And if so, whose? That's just totally different class of problem. One is almost a unique, like every single time is a whole new world, to where AI applies way more to data breach response than it does to ediscovery, because each time two corporations are arguing, the people involved are different, the lawyers are different, the topics are different, the data is different, everything's different. Whereas in data breach response, like in privacy, we're looking for the same stuff every time. We know the EU lays out real clearly what counts for this stuff. The US does too. Canada does, Australia does. You know what you're looking for. So across the different projects, the software can get better and better at it.
So if I hear you well, one thing is reacting to a data breach, AI is the perfect solution, but there are two use cases at a broad level, which we can have. One is when the data has been breached and you want to estimate, gauge the size and scale of the problem. But the other one is the e-discovery, which you do at the data mapping, data inventory, records of processing activity time, when you are trying to ascertain where my data is, what type of data is in which location, especially the unstructured data. And that's where your AI or the e-discovery can help you. So those are two distinct use cases.
Yeah, and we kind of like, part of our evolution, we even pushed back on the idea and we say, this is not e-discovery. E-discovery is about answering responsiveness levels for documents, like whether they're relevant legally to a litigation. A PII review is a different thing. A PII review is not, is this document, because if you think about it, just for like even a quick second to think about it, in e-discovery, in a true e-discovery review, a reviewer gets to a spreadsheet, they look at it and say, well, is this relevant? And it might be like a list of names and potential clients of a drug that's being argued about. And they'll be like, oh yeah, this is relevant. It's potential clients. In data breach response, like when we're doing that in incident response, we look at that same spreadsheet and say, okay, it's names and addresses, but it's also like NHS numbers or social security. So we're like, holy crap. Like the fact that it's relevant is just the beginning. What I have to do is now link all of that together and get myself on a footing to send these human beings notifications or something. So like, I would even say what we're doing is not at all e-discovery. What we're doing is data breach response.
Yeah, I mean, of course, as Canopy, if I look at it, you do the data breach response, but I'm talking in the general sense. AI has different use cases.
Totally.
While in your case, what you describe is the second use case, when the data breach has happened and you need to make sense of the size or scale of damage or the problem that you have.
Yep, absolutely. That data mining, I mean, often called data mining in our world, but like that, okay, we've got we've got 1 million records, we got 10 million records, we've got 100 million records. How bad is it? What's the nature of the PII? Like how long is the review going to be? How many, like that's a, without AI, that is a very big ask. But even during the review, the PII review, you still need AI to help speed it up too.
Yeah. And I think it's a perfect moment for me to ask you, what does Canopy do? So what's the sweet spot? I know you say that you're world's leading data breach response software, but what exactly does it do? And how does it fit in for a company?
So two buckets of things that Canopy does. So on the reactive side, we're the world's leading data breach response software. And frankly, we're the only data breach response software for what we do. So, and what goes into our software is data that's been identified as compromised. So this is like loose, like file share data. This is sometimes structured data from a database. This is sometimes like just emails, business email compromise. Like, so that's what comes in. And then throughout the system, they, reduce the data set to the documents that have PII, do the PII review. and then do the entity management, entity consolidation. So one person might be in a data set like 20 times, but like a lawyer just wants to know, okay, that's cool, but what if their data was compromised? What is their actual name? Even though we have 20 different versions of their name, there's some misspellings, middle name, maiden name, whatever. And what's the address of where we send in the notification? So what goes in is data, like raw data, structured and unstructured, and largely unstructured though. But and then what comes out is a list of human beings and their addresses that we're gonna send a notification to for like an attorney. And what happens in the middle is where our clients, where our customers do all that work. So that's what we do on the reactive side, is the data breach response workflow. And then what we do on the proactive side, and this kind of came about organically, we had customers that they were using us because of a data breach response, and they started saying, well, I wish we would have known this ahead of time. Like, yes, we were trying our best to comply internally with all of our processes. We were sending surveys, we had endpoints, we were trying to do detection, but we didn't know the HR team was moving data around like this. We had no idea. But in your software, like we knew, like within day one of the data breach response project, they were like, man, if I would have had this information 6 months ago, this would not be quite the problem right now. So then we came out with a proactive product called Privacy Audit. And it takes kind of a different approach. Whereas a lot of people, when they look at data, they try and like do a scorched earth, look at all the data in the enterprise. And our answer, our kind of thesis is like, that's kind of impossible, because what you're proposing is to do a data breach response project on the whole company. And nobody's going to do that, because we know it's really hard to do it on just a single email. Like one inbox is actually a hard project. It's not nothing. Our software makes it easier, but it's still not nothing. And you need insurance to pay for it. You're not going to run that on your entire enterprise. So rather than like look at everything, all you need is directions. So look at like 2 people from a given department, HR, marketing, sales, etc., and just see what's there. Like, so you take a quick look and you see what's the PII footprint, what's truly there. And now we're not in the anecdote world anymore. We're in the like actual data. So you can like plop the report down. You have your benchmarks for the executive team in the C-suite. You know, like, here's the risk level of this data. And that's quantifiable. Like if you know, like this sort of data, if there was a compromise event, here is what the downstream cost would be. And we know, you look at like 2 people from HR, you can speak to the whole department at that point. You don't have to look at all of them if you look at 2 and it's consistent. So now you can actually say, okay, what do we need to do here? Like, how can we have the conversation around, is it retention policies? Is it better training? Is it using data differently or thinking about it differently with a sensitivity towards their real world? So now you understand it. So again, like you're never going to like it's no one solution, but it gives you the tools you need to drive the right behaviors and to have the right training. So that's the 2 things. We have the reactive data breach response product, and then we have the proactive privacy, like let me get my arms around what's actually happening so that I can drive the right behaviors internally.
Okay, so let me ask you a trick question. So you are working imaginary DPO in a company, data protection officer in a company. You've been given a budget of say $20,000. You have to pick to invest it in proactive manner or a reactive manner. How much would you put in each bucket?
And I mean, like, I guess I'd say, I guess if I have 20 grand, I'm probably a very small company.
That's yeah, say it's a startup, just about getting into mid-size, looking to go into Europe kind of situation, and thinking of, should we do GDPR, should we not? And they hire you and you stumble upon as the person there.
I mean, I get like, in a way, by definition, everything I do is proactive. If I'm like looking, by definition, if I have 20 grand and there hasn't been an incident yet, then any step I take is a proactive step. So I'm like almost by definition going to put it all into proactive. And then it's just figuring out like, what's my best bang for buck? And again, like everything I'm saying now has like 1,000 caveats of it depends. But I'm probably going to pretty quickly figure out, like if I'm a small company that has a DPO, I'm probably B2C at that point. I'm probably handling certain kinds of customer data. I'm probably using SaaS products like a Stripe or an Amazon or all sorts of stuff. So I'm seeing, what do I actually hang on to? What do they hang on to? What do customers deal, like what are our internal folks dealing with? So I'm probably going to put it all on trying to get and obviously like, what's our insurance policy look like? And what does our insurance company require of us? I'm going to look at that kind of stuff and who are our vendors. So I get like this simple answer to your question is by definition, probably proactive.
Okay, that's good to know. And now let's imagine that a company doesn't have any of these processes or things like that, but they detect a breach and then they call you. How would you advise them, because they have the 72-hour timeline hanging on them? Yep. What's the one thing you would ask them to do?
The one thing is probably like it's a little bit of a fork, but if you have cyber insurance, call your cyber insurer right now, get off the phone with me, call them, break it all down. If they don't, regardless, I'm probably going to give them the name of an attorney and just to save them the trouble, I'm probably going to like give them an actual name depending on where they are in the world. So if they're in like, and just say, call this person right now, that's your next move. You need good advice.
Makes sense. You mentioned cyber insurance or insurance a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So allow me to ask you, in your view, what's the right moment to buy an insurance for cybersecurity or privacy?
Right now. The right moment is right
now. I mean, of course, right now is the best moment. And the other one was 5 years ago. That's what the Chinese proverb says. But I mean, because there are a lot of new companies popping up. And at that moment, breach insurance or cybersecurity insurance is not a priority.
Yep.
So if someone is setting up a company, what would be the right moment for them to think of a cybersecurity insurance? Because normally it's indemnity insurance, professional insurance, or other insurances which are playing.
And all the same caveats occur, but I would basically say when your business is a real business, that's the time, like when you have a real business to defend. Because in the beginning, when you're a startup, it's an idea and you're seen, and that's probably, you're using so much other stuff that your agreements with all those companies is going to cover a lot of stuff. Like your agreements with Stripe and Amazon and whoever like Facebook, like you're going to be covered through all the different things that you're dealing with. And in the very, very beginning, you might be handling no PII at all. So it might not be a super big thing, but as soon as, if you have a real business that really is generating real money and has real potential, and again, like so much of this depends, and I'm doing this through the lens of a tech company, from a kind of software is eating the world. So every new business is in some way a tech business because there's no chance.
Absolutely. There's no business without data, no business without tech.
Correct.
Unless you're a pure manufacturing business or a retail.
Agree. And even then, like manufacturers, like you play it out and there's like, oh, what are your contracts like? Who is doing the manufacturing? Are you outsourcing that to China? How are you managing that? Who are you selling it to? Like, who are your clients and how do you keep track of that? What's like, I mean, they're like, it's impossible not to immediately be like, whoa, like we're a software company, or at least we're like a software integration company. Like you're integrating.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think if we look at a few years ago, 10 years or maybe 15 years ago, we used to say the cars are not in the business of data. That's what the typical statement was. And now when we look at the number of chips we have, the number of data points that are being collected, and with the device which allows me to set up my time of entry, time of locking it, unlocking it, and my profile, my driving behavior, it is the data company now. So the world is moving very fast.
Yeah, every company is a software company. And it's a little reductive, but it's pretty true. Like there's just tech involved in so much. And the number one manufacturing constraint for cars is like CPUs right now. Like they can't make it enough because they don't have enough CPUs. So that kind of tells you the degree to which technology is bundled into everything. Yeah.
At the start, you mentioned cookies are a nuisance, or cookies are not the solution that we were looking for. So if you had a magic wand, how would you solve the cookie problem?
I don't know that I guess I would say, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, right? So like here's what I'll put on the table. I get what they were going for, and I think that's admirable. I also think that they didn't, like, the unintended consequences of the cookie consent thing is it just teaches us all to say yes to stuff.
Exactly.
Like it just, And that's just so dangerous. And they just didn't conceive, like, I don't think they thought through the like downstream of that. So, and here's the thing, right? Like what people are not clear enough is that everything is trade-offs. Everything is trade-offs. So on one hand, like, even if we're to talk about a company like now Meta, but like, let's talk about like Facebook Meta, like on one hand, yes, they have ostensibly a lot of data, but what they do is allow tons of businesses to exist and flourish that wouldn't otherwise exist. So if you have an idea for a laundry detergent that is like organic and that you're like, you know what, I think people would dig this. And now I can like, thanks to software and tech, I can reach out and find people to make it pretty easily. And thanks to Facebook, Instagram, and like the Meta at the bigger level, I can find the niche of people who are interested in this. And I don't personally, as the laundry detergent company, need to know them individually, but I know if they check these boxes, if they're into these things, surface them my ad, that's a business that just straight up couldn't exist like previously. And that's amazing. Now, the flip side of that is obviously there's a lot of data that Facebook has. So like, how do we feel about that? I don't know. It's a little weird. But on the other hand, it's enabling all this awesome stuff. So I guess on the like, and this is like something that I think a lot about and that I think and that I value a lot, but I don't know that cookie consent nails the right trade-offs between the problem it's set out to solve and what it's doing for us. And I actually think in some ways, like, I trust personally some bigger companies to have more safeguards and processes around data than I would the kind of wild west of third-party data brokers. Just by definition, that's a little sketchier to me. So I think going after defining the problem more clearly, I would encourage like not that like if I had the magic wand, I would encourage the EU to like take a step back and look at what problem they're trying to solve and what trade-offs, because like the EU itself, and I mean, this is like a rabbit hole of a rabbit hole, but like their business trade-offs like they have laws that completely conflict because on one hand, you need to enable competition. And on the other hand, you need to comply with privacy regulations. And sometimes those things aren't direct. Like if you want compliance with certain kinds of things, then Facebook has to hold on to all data at all times. But if you want competition, they have to share data. Those two things, what do you really want here and what trade-off are you willing to make? I don't think people are facing that choice, the intersection of these trade-offs clearly enough. And that's what I would encourage. And I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that you cannot take a purely privacy lens here because the intersection of privacy and business and commerce is where this all lives. And we want to enable businesses to thrive. We want to enable people to start their own, come up with their own ideas and go out there and start businesses because that's like awesome and admirable and cool. And I want that organic laundry detergent. So if somebody has a cool idea, like advertise it to me. I want to know about it. I might want it. Like I'm not like a rampant consumer, but I do like to know about things and I want people to surface things. So I don't know. I don't, that's kind of a cop out because I just like said things I'd like them to consider, but that's how I think about it.
No, I think it needs to be solved. And at the moment, the balance is not right. It's too much of complexity when we enter websites. It's too much of the only option is to say yes. And anything else you say, the functionality is so degraded that you come back and say yes. So there's no way out. It needs to be done in a better way, or maybe get rid of the cookies at all, or for once for all. But to be seen.
Yep. A lot of human time. If you think of the aggregate human time spent wrestling with cookie consent, it's kind of wild to think like years of humanity's time has now been spent with that brief pause on website. But the aggregate time is like real. It's kind of meaningless moments between the moments, but it's also like in aggregate, like that's a lot of time that humans are now spending like just dealing with cookie consent. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. And most of us privacy professionals apart, most of them, they don't understand, and they don't understand why this pop-up is popping in.
Exactly. Like I appreciate it. Like that's the thing that like, you can't just take a one track, like myopic, this is the only lens through which I'm going to consider, because you're always making trade-offs. And when people go to like, and that's why it's interesting for us in the privacy world, because on one hand, we're privacy professionals, but on the other hand, we're like human beings that like also exist in the world and are in like, and also like care about our own data and understand a little better about the trade-offs that have to be made. So I think that's, but there's very real trade-offs. I just don't think we always talk about them.
Yeah, I think the simpler option in my view would be to have a do not track option at the start. Are you okay to be tracked? Yes. I'm okay to be tracked? No. And then behind the scenes, it should be simplified, because if it's a straight yes or a no, people can make a choice. But making it functional, analytical, marketing, and so on, and that huge list which is popping up these days with legitimate interest and consent and so on, which nobody understands, it is not being helpful.
Well, to that point, though, here's what I would even say. The do not track thing is a little complicated, because even that, like I don't think there's a practical way to tell at least Google not to record their search results. Like seriously, like when you run a search, like there's some level of tracking that Google is going to do. And there's this whole debate on first party versus third party.
Yes.
And it's very complicated, because essentially, like the argument that Apple makes about privacy is very like essentially their argument about Facebook. I'm being reductive, but they're saying it's okay if you do what Facebook is doing if it's first party data, meaning our data, and you own it's data that you're capturing, I guess. But like there's app developers who would tell Apple, hey, you tracking my app stuff, like that's not first party to me. I made that app. That's my app, and I might be selling it in your app store. But for you to call my app data first party, it feels second or third. And Amazon obviously has first party data out the wazoo, because like Amazon is the Google if I want to buy a thing. And Apple has first party data. So now Google has first party data via both Android and Google search itself. So like these are all like, and yet the things they're doing is kind of the same, like enabling commerce, enabling tracking. Like, I don't know. It's a whole ball of wax.
I don't think we can solve it, but it's an interesting or fascinating topic from a perspective of debate for sure. And it is creating a lot of debate. Anyhow, in essence of time, it didn't feel like that we are through the time we had foreseen. What would be your one final message before I say thank you?
I mean, one final message is like, privacy is a cool thread to pull. So I would urge people to continue to pull it. And here's what I'll say. Like, I guess, let me refine that a little even, is like, we're like in the early stages of this big privacy game. Things are changing quickly, moving fast. You don't have to be the expert in everything, because nobody can be, but be aware that like, we're evolving our thinking pretty regularly. So I guess like, all right, so what is my like one piece of advice? Whoever you think are like smart, cool people that are in the privacy space that you like talking to, talk to them regularly. Like that's just, I mean, once a month, whatever it is, and just exchange information with them and ask them what they're seeing, because like, we're all kind of in this together and things are moving really fast and we all are like sample sets of one. So like extend your, like, again, if you vibe with someone, talk to them, ask them questions, answer their questions, like make friends in the privacy space and ask them what their world is look like, because we're all learning from each other, and it's moving so fast that we need to learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of the initiative me and Jeff Jockish, your friend, also has. What we have is, I think you've been probably there one time, if I remember, but maybe not. The Privacy Coffee House, which we run every fourth Tuesday of a month. Sorry. And we like-minded privacy professionals gather in, and it's just a networking, just a chat on various topics like we were having on the cookie consent. But now, based on this topic, this conversation, if somebody wants to contact you, what's the best possible way?
Canopy Software, our website is canopyco.io. And then you can find all the information you want, canopyco.io, both of our data breach software and our privacy audit product. And I'll say, like, the space is so new. All the materials on there are just straight educational, because they kind of have to be, because the space is so new. And even if you look at like the NIST, like in America, the definition of incident response data breach is like one line. So we kind of have to like bring all the education to it. But that's the easiest way to find us, where we like, whoever has an interest or just wants to talk or ask questions, canopyco.io.
Sure. So with that, I have to say, in essence of time, thank you so much, Adi. It was a profound, useful conversation and very insightful on different complex topics.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciated it, and it was absolutely delightful.
Thank you so much.
Fit for Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.fit4privacy.com. Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Until next time, goodbye. If you have questions or suggestions, feel free to drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. That's hello@FIT4privacy.com.